Susan Hunston has done research in corpus linguistics and is, I do think that there is nobody who does corpus linguistics and who has not heard of or read about your work. Susan has always been interested in also seeing how corpus linguistics can be applied. So this field of applied corpus linguistics, I think, has always been very dear to you, which is great. But perhaps we should also mention Susan has always also been active in the field of discourse analysis, and in one of her books, Susan has brought these topics together. And I think the presentation today also shows that your interest in joining and integrating things and bringing things together. So in the presentation today, called Pattern Construction System, Reconciling Approaches to Lexis and Grammar. Susan is talking about one of her projects that has sort of drawn on several major different linguistic frameworks to create sort of a more unified approach to our understanding of lexis and grammar in English. And of course, hopefully that will bring us even new insights into language structures and meaning. I think this is a forever topical topic in linguistics, but I also think it couldn't be any more topical because we think about that in fresh terms when we think about language models. And so I think we will have an interesting discussion around that too. So thank you so much for being here today. We all look very much forward to your lecture. Thank you, Susan.
For that very kind introduction, and hello everybody. It's very nice to see everybody. I'm slightly embarrassed because my presentation today has nothing to do with application at all. This is not applied anything. It is simply an account of what I have been doing for the last 3 years. And I've already broken it. Oh no, I haven't. There you go. So it's a kind of extended advertisement for a book which was published a couple of months to last month. But it's okay because you don't have to spend a lot of money buying the book because it's available open access from Cambridge University Press. And I shall also be talking about a website which kind of stands behind the book, as it were, and is a database which I shall be talking about. A few thanks to Leverhulme, who funded the project, my website developers who were very patient with my total ignorance, and 3 wonderful research assistants who helped hugely in the project. So my aim was to reconcile, to bring together 3 approaches to lexis and grammar, which in a sense it seemed to me had rarely spoken to each other, but had a lot to inform each other, a lot of ways in which they could inform each other. And these were pattern grammar, construction grammar, and systemic functional grammar. Can I just, from the people in the room, can I just have a show of hands if you have heard before of pattern grammar? Hands up. Okay. If you have heard before of construction grammar. Okay. And if you have heard before of systemic functional grammar. Okay. Right. Thank you. So a few notes on those there, mainly to say that pattern grammar is kind of no theory at all, really. It is language as an observed phenomenon. Construction grammar comes from cognitive linguistics, which means that it views language as a mental phenomenon. The job of the grammarian is to work out what's going on in the head, if you're a construction grammarian. Systemic functional grammar sees language as a social phenomenon, not so much interested with what's going on in the head, but is interested in what's going on in society. And my position in starting this project was that I was a kind of insider in the world of pattern grammar and an outsider in the world of construction grammar and systemic functional grammar. I say that so if I say anything stupid about construction grammar or systemics, you'll forgive me because I'm an outsider in those fields. So tell you a bit about pattern grammar, which was developed essentially as a coding system for the entries in the Cobuild dictionary that was published many, many years ago in 1995. It was designed, as I say, not as a theory of grammar, really, but it was designed as a coding system that was transparent, was simple to use, was flexible and comprehensive. So it was designed to tell people who were using the dictionary, this is how you use this word. It has been described a little bit unkindly, but probably true, as a grammar for people who don't know anything about grammar. You're supposed to be able to use it even if you know absolutely nothing. It is, of course, open to criticism, and two criticisms are that it ignores any structural differences. My colleague Wolfgang Teubert wrote a paper basically saying the people who invented pattern grammar don't know anything about grammar. And he was right. So, for example, if you say a young father of 21 or a father of 3 daughters, the of there is doing a very different job. But in terms of pattern, they are both the same. So they're both, the father is a noun, of is of, and it's followed by a noun. So the structural difference there is totally ignored. And the same with the cat chased the mouse. The cat was a nuisance. The chased and was are doing very different jobs as verbs. You will talk about the difference between an object and a complement there. But in terms of pattern, we treated those exactly the same. They're both a verb followed by a noun. And then another former colleague, Patrick Hanks, also wrote about how ridiculous pattern grammar was, because he said quite rightly that it ignores semantic roles. So he said that if you look at the verb fire, it's very different whether it's she fired the gun or she fired the employee. Very different meanings there. But in terms of pattern grammar, we pretend they're both the same because they're both verb followed by noun. So it is, as I say, it is a way of coding things that is a bit simplistic. And here's one of the examples of an entry from that Cobuild dictionary, the word gaze. 3 meanings here. If you gaze at someone, you look steadily at them for a long time. If you gaze at someone or something, you look steadily at them for a long time. For example, he gazed reflectively at the fire, and we have said that that is a verb. Yes, we got one thing right. It's a verb, and it has the patterns verb followed by at, verb at noun, or verb followed by some other preposition or adverb. The second sense, you can talk about someone's gaze. She felt increasingly uncomfortable under the woman's steady gaze. We said that's a count noun, which means it can be singular or plural. And we helpfully said it's usually singular and it's usually with the possessive. And then if someone is in the public gaze, they're receiving a lot of attention, and we just said that's a phrase. So that's the kind of very simple kind of coding of the verbs. If we look at a pattern, then we've got one form, but several meanings. So the pattern verb noun to noun is used with concede the office to someone, lead me to the next point, deporting him to Egypt, promised aid to countries, how to break the news to customers. So lots of different meanings there, but the same pattern. So there's clearly no one-to-one relationship between the pattern, the form of the pattern, and the meaning. No one-to-one relationship. But on the other hand, there is a sort of regularity. So in 1996, a book was published about which brought together all the patterns, all the verb patterns in the Cobuild dictionary, and listed exhaustively, believe me, exhaustively, all the verbs that have a particular pattern, coded with a particular pattern, and divided those verbs into meaning groups. So for this pattern, we had 417 lemmas, and we divided those into 30 meaning groups. And if you're saying what was the theory of semantics that lay behind that, I have to say there was no theory of semantics that lay behind it. It was simply individuals looking at a list of 417 verbs and thinking, what meaning can we see here? Which means that other people might look at it and come to different conclusions, but it was on the other hand, nobody else had looked at 417 verbs and tried to group them into meanings, so we were making some kind of advance on anything that had been done before. So those are some of the 30 meaning groups with that pattern, verb, noun to noun. And when we did that, quite often if I stood at a conference and talked like this, somebody in the audience would put their hand up and say, but this is just constructions, isn't it? I'd never heard of constructions. I just had to say, yes, probably, maybe, I don't know. And eventually went off and educated myself on construction grammar and saw that there were indeed a lot of similarities between constructions and patterns. But I had also, I mean, this is quite personal because I had also, for a very long time, been influenced by systemic functional grammar as a way of accounting for the way that language works in the world, the way that language construes the world, construes society, and found that a very appealing approach to grammar, even though I didn't work on it myself. And then I came across two quotations which I thought were interesting. So in a fairly recent book, Matheson has talked about systemic grammar and has said everything is systems. Everything in language can be explained in terms of systems. He's looking at language as a social semiotic. It models a community's language resources. Language is an interlocking series of choices with ideological consequences, and there is a continuity of grammar and lexis. But the significant thing here is it's systems all the way down. Everything is systems, because there is a very similar quotation, and I don't know if these two people are aware of this, that says it's constructions all the way down. Everything is constructions. Language is a mental construct. It models a language user's resources. Language is an interlocking set of learned constructions, and constructions also integrate lexis and grammar. So I thought, here are two models of language, both of which I admire very much, both of which say we can account for everything that occurs in language, both of which totally ignore pattern grammar, which I've been working on. But maybe we can bring all these together. So I started with constructions, which are a pairing of meaning and form. So anything which is form and meaning together is a construction, all levels of generality. And said, let's try and look at pattern and meaning as if it was constructions. So this is an example of what I spent 2 years doing. Taking a pattern, such as verb, noun to noun that we've just looked at. Identifying what I called a construction, and in this case gave it a name, the grant respect to someone construction, which isn't a very clever name. Most construction grammarians use much cleverer names than that, but at least you can see what it means. The description of it is a person treats someone in a particular way, expressed as a figurative giving of an attitude such as respect to a person. So it's a kind of metaphoric transfer of possession. A whole load of verbs that can be used, I suggest, in this construction. And again, this is just me looking at it and saying, I think these verbs belong together. I think these verbs go into this construction. There's an example, he granted respect to everyone. And that's the corpus that example comes from. And for some of these, and I'll explain that a bit in a moment, I also coded the different elements of the construction. So in this case, the field is possession transfer. So we're talking about transferring possession, even though it's metaphoric. And the roles are, the first noun phrase is the donor, the second noun phrase is the possession, and the third noun phrase is the recipient, which is very straightforward. He granted respect to everyone. He gives this thing called respect to the people who receive it. And this is construction number 5, you will see there, which means there are lots of constructions, at least 5, from the pattern verb, noun to noun. And in fact, there are 37. When I say there are 37, what I mean is I invented 37. So if you remember, the original work on pattern grammar suggested there were 30 meaning groups created without any kind of semantic theory. Here are 37 constructions created without any kind of semantic theory, but just me sitting looking at the page and saying, I think that's a construction. So it's built on the work that had originally been done, but kind of reinterpreted it. So I've given you half of the 37 there, which you can take a look at. So I was following the principle in construction grammar of form and meaning, a pairing of form and meaning, where the form is the pattern plus the lexical items. Is there a question or you? So a bit of a simpler example, the pattern verb after noun, so verbs that are followed by after. Identified here only 4 constructions: the yearn after something construction, the follow after someone construction, the chase after something construction, and the clean up after someone construction. And that just came from 4 meaning groups from the original work that was done in the 1990s. So a person wants something very much, a person follows another person with negative intentions, a person tries to get a physical or abstract thing that's difficult to get, or a person helps someone, for example, by correcting their mistakes. So that's not, however, the whole story, because in doing this, and as I say, I spent 2 years doing this, so I actually took 50 of the original verb complementation patterns, and from those 50 patterns derived just over 800 constructions. But as I was doing that, realized that making a list of constructions didn't really tell the whole story at all, because some of the constructions are much more like each other than others are. There's a similarity between some constructions. And that in fact, knowing how general to make the description was quite a problem. What counts as a construction? Is it the big thing like transfer possession, or is it the little thing like give a book to someone? So of course, my answer to all of those questions is always it's both. So for example, if we go from general to specific, so we can talk about a person transfers an entity to an entity. So this is one use of the verb noun to noun pattern. And it can be a person physically transfers a physical entity, or figuratively transfers a physical or an abstract entity. The physical transfer can be something to do with like an object, like give the book to someone, or it can be a message, as in mail something to somebody. The figurative transfer, there are lots of, again, subcategories. Allocate something to someone, bequeath something to someone, grant something to someone, concede something to someone, or introduce someone to someone. So lots of figurative transfer meanings there. If we follow up the mail example, so we've got in bold there, you mail something to someone. So now we're getting a bit more specific to even more specific. So we're physically transferring a message. So this can be in writing. So you've got the verbs pen. I mean, rather old-fashioned to say you pen a letter to somebody, but it is found. You can pencil a note to somebody. Can you really? Yeah, I think possibly. Or just write. You can focus on the sending. It can be initiating the sending. I mean, the more you go into detail, you just divide these groups of verbs up into smaller and smaller groups. So you can mail something, post something, send something. You can forward or return something. So that's in response. And it can be electronic, or it can be a non-specific medium like relay. So a good way of showing this is actually to borrow from systemic functional linguistics and to say we have a network here. So what you see here is the pattern verb noun to noun. There are 4 kinds of meaning: action, communication, cognition, and relation. And if you take just the action one, you can talk about transfer or change or causality. And if you take just the transfer one, you can divide it into literal or figurative. And then if you take the literal one, you've got that give a book to someone, or mail a letter to someone. And under mail, you've got the whole of those specific constructions that we were looking at before. So it's now looking at the constructions as either the very general ones, so you can say you have a transfer something literal from one person to another, that is a construction, or you can say relay a message to someone is a construction, and both of those would be true. As they said, it's constructions all the way down. The whole of the network for verb noun to noun looks like that. So we're not going to focus any attention on that because none of us can read it. But it's basically what I've just shown you, but just more of it. So I was able to do that for each of the 50 verb patterns. Here's another one. This is the verb noun with noun, where it seemed sensible. I mean, I really like it when it works like that. When what was different was, in a sense, the meaning of the word with in the different constructions. So there was what I called a conjoining with, where 2 things are put in relationship, such as balance one thing with another or intersperse one activity with another. The transfer with, where something is moved, furnish someone with something, confront someone with a problem, which is a metaphoric one, or the manner with how something is done, answer a question with words, assist someone with a task, begin a time with an activity. So, about a year after the start of the project, we have 50 verb patterns. Each pattern and meaning group reinterpreted subjectively as a set of constructions. And the constructions were expressed as a network. And the constructions seen as all levels of generality. So that was the end of part one of the project. Turn to systemic functional grammar, and had already, of course, used the notion of systemics in creating the networks, but decided now to turn the whole thing on its head and to take the notion from systemics of semantic fields, of meanings, and of there being different ways of expressing particular meanings. Now, this is where the whole project got a little bit less ambitious, because I decided that life was too short, or certainly my life was too short, to go through every possible meaning that it is possible to express. So I selected 9 meaning areas, and don't worry, I'm not going to take you through all 9. It would be far too exhausting. But I took areas like communication. So what are all the ways that we can talk about communicating with each other, cognition, and causation. So I'm just going to take causation, which can be expressed through verb. I mean, there's been volumes written on the language of causation. Some of it a bit over imaginative in my view, but anyway. So things like kill, cause to die, or drop, cause to fall. There are periphrastic expressions of causation, like allow someone to do something, cause something to happen, enable someone to do something. And Biber et al. Have a good list of those verbs. Some nice work on different kinds of causing. So things like the tree falling on it made the lorry lose its loading. One thing happens and that causes another. Or making somebody do something. I got John to repaint the wall. Examples from Gilquin there. And then work has been done on constructions and causation. So the colostruction work with the causative into construction, I tricked John into repainting the wall. Another pair of people who think pattern grammar is rubbish and told us so in their paper describing this. So I thought, okay, one of the ways that kinds of causation that's talked about is causing an action or event. So a speaker may express that a person or thing makes someone do something, or a person or thing makes something happen. And there are different resources that are available to make those meanings. There are different pattern types. There are patterns with prepositions. For example, Raj talked Lucy into leaving. There are patterns without prepositions. Raj forced Lucy to leave. There is explicitness, where all elements are explicit. Investment enabled the company to stay open, or some elements are inexplicit. The stone broke the window. How did the stone get there? We're not told in that sentence. There is a causa type, which may be a person or an entity. There is a cause type. It may be communication. Lucy talked Raj into robbing the bank. or it may be construed as action. Lucy tricked Raj into robbing the bank. And the result can be an action or an absence of action. That's the difference between forced Raj to leave and prevented Raj from leaving. In other words, in case you're wondering who Lucy and Raj are, they are nobody, of course. In doing this, I ended up inventing the examples, which, of course, corpus linguists would think is a terrible thing to do. But it was the way of making the contrast between the different kinds of resource more obvious. It also, to be perfectly honest, saved time. Forgive me, gods of corpus linguistics. Yeah. And here again, we can show this as a network, but this time, instead of having the form as the entry point to the network on the left-hand side, we've got the meaning. So if you cause an action, you can do so explicitly or implicitly, without a preposition or with the preposition. And if we look at the without prepositions, it looks like that. And we can look at just part of it, which makes it more legible. So now we're going from the meaning to one of the choices of how to make that meaning without a preposition, to the patterns that are the resources for making that meaning without a preposition, then the choices of person as cause or entity of cause as positive or negative, other choices, person as affected, entity as affected, and ending up with the constructions, the help someone do something construction, the make someone do something construction, the help something happen, make something happen, send someone doing something, prevent someone doing something. So you end up, you start with the meaning, you go through the various choices, and you end up at the construction. But again, I have to confess that it's all made up. It is all just one person looking at it and saying, I think this is how the networks work. It isn't any kind of statistics, I have to say. Nothing like that goes into this. So we've got, yes, that's just giving it colors, which doesn't help very much at all, really. We'll go on to that. We can do the same with the prepositions. So those are the patterns with prepositions. And we have this time separating positive and negative. So we have verb, noun, things like talk somebody into doing something, trick somebody into doing something, trap someone into an action, jolt someone into an action, and so on. So you've got all the constructions at the rightmost end of the network, and a form at the left hand. This goes on in exhaustive detail, I'm afraid to say. So we now look at the implicit kind of causation. And again, you see the point here that you go from the implicit meaning to the patterns that are involved with this, and moving on to the constructions that make that meaning. Sadly, that's not all, but I'm not going to take you through the rest of it in quite as much detail. You'll be relieved to know. So in fact, if you look at causation, causing an action or event is only one part of causation. You've also got causing a state, making a change in state, and you've got causing a thought or emotion. So making somebody afraid, for example, making somebody think something. And so if you look at the website or you look in the book, you'll see similar networks for cause, state, and cause, thought, and emotion. And actually, it goes even one further back than that, which I'm not going to show you, because, of course, expressing causation through the verb pattern is only one of the ways of expressing causation, because you can also do it through things like nouns. The cause of this was this, or you can, of course, do it through conjunctions. So it is only part of the story, but this is the only part of the story that I'm dealing with. Now, when you get to so systemic functional linguistics was a big inspiration for showing the networks like that, but systemicists would hate it, of course. And Matheson, again, in his 2023 book, thank goodness he published his book in 2023. It was so helpful to me when I was just starting this. It was tremendous. He pointed out, I mean, he wasn't talking about these networks that I've just showed you, but he was talking about similar things. He said the problem with them is that they are unidimensional and that they are taxonomies, they are not systems. So although I was using the notion of system as inspiration for that work, actually what I've produced are taxonomies rather than systems. So they are categories of the ways of expressing things. And as networks, they contain a lot of repetition, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Whereas within systemics, the choices that they talk about are actually simultaneous choices. And we need to show that in a system network. So if we take a simple network, we have an implicit way of expressing cause. We have two patterns, verb that clause, verb WH clause. In each case, there is a choice between person as cause, a person arranges that something happens, or an entity as cause, a thing dictates that something happens. The same with WH clauses, a person influences what happens, a thing determines what happens. So you've obviously got repetition there. So what a more systemic-y thing to do would be to say, if you want to express causation implicitly, you must choose between the patterns, between patterns that are available, and simultaneously you choose between what the causa is. So you choose between the patterns, verb that clause or verb WH clause, and simultaneously you choose between the causa, whether it's a person or an entity. And if you make one choice from each of those parts of the system, you end up with a particular construction. So this, again, illegibly, is the causation system network, which gives you a simultaneous choice between meaning and form. And does this do this? Ah, it does. Yes. So you've got a set of meaning choices, a set of form choices, and I think the next one, yes, the next one's a little bit more legible. So this is just the meaning choices. And so you choose again simultaneously between the representation type, the outcome, the participants, and the means of the cause. So these curly brackets, rather inexpertly drawn here by me, but shown in green to show that they're curly brackets and not straight brackets, that's a systemic way of saying this is a simultaneous choice. So you choose whether to express. So we're starting with causation, we're looking at meaning, and we're saying you can express it congruently or metaphorically. It can be a state or a thought or emotion or an action or event. It can be positive or negative. The cause can be a person or an entity, and the thing that is affected can be a person or an entity. And the thing that makes the cause can be an action or an act of communication. Those are all your meaning choices. And then simultaneously, you're choosing the form, which is you choose which pattern you're going to use, whether it's with a phrasal clause or with a preposition, and you choose a subject type, whether it's a cause or whether it's the affected or the outcome. Makes you wonder how we speak at all, really, doesn't it? So having made all those choices, we come out with a sentence. Of course, I should say, and I'm joking about that, but of course, the notion of choice in systemics is not actually that somebody sits there and makes a choice. It's that if you look at the whole output that people make, you can model it as if it was a system of choices, which is what I have just tried to do. So, let me catch up with myself here. So the reason those networks are useful, I think, is that it tells us that expressing causation uses resources of both meaning and form, and they can be represented as simultaneous or independent choices. The relevant resources of form are the complementation patterns and the subject types, and we've got various different kinds of meaning resources that feed into that as well, that we've actually just talked about. Another example, a much simpler example to work with, was the example of creation. This is the meaning area of creation. So how we talk about somebody making something. And there were only 12 constructions to work with here. So 12 constructions were identified by me looking at them as contributing to the semantic field of creation. The patterns used could be either simple or complex. And the simple patterns were essentially, well, they were the verb noun pattern, and either the verb noun with a physical verb, physical meaning verb, or verb noun with a communication meaning verb. There are so many verbs in English that have the pattern verb noun. I mean, it's basically all transitive verbs. You know, hundreds of them. I divided them here into material and communication and cognition and relation as well. So we've got a build something construction, a form something construction, a hold event construction, a publish a book, give a speech constructions. And then the complex patterns have a beneficiary or have a location or have constituents. So you make something for somebody, carve words in the rock, drill a hole in the tree, manufacture something from or out of constituent materials. So this is much more straightforward. And here we have, again, the systemic network rather than the taxonomy. So choices between choices of meaning, choices of form. The meaning is physical or abstract, and the form is either two participants or more than two participants. And if it's more than two participants, then you have a beneficiary, and you have location, or you have constituents. So I draw to a close now, really, and think about what gave a talk yesterday on ref, and I said that when you're doing a publication that you hope will be considered in the research excellence framework exercise, it's a good idea to say what you think the significance of the work is. So this is my ref statement. This is what I think the significance of the work is. So I think it offers something to corpus linguists, because I think it demonstrates the relevance of what was a very extensive piece of corpus analysis to theories of lexis and grammar. Pattern grammar isn't largely used, and I did describe it as grammar for people who don't know anything about grammar. But the real big advantage of it is that it was applied to every word in the Cobuild dictionary. And so it is a very exhaustive description of English in terms of pattern. So it shows the usefulness, I think, of doing that to other. And I think it demonstrates the value of starting with observation, which is what corpus linguists tend to do, and accommodating the observation to theory. To construction grammarians, I think it offers a resource to work with. This is not so much in the book as on the website, where you do have 800 blooming constructions to go at. So they are there to work with, to test out, to criticize, to say this doesn't work statistically, to say I would do it differently. Fine, okay, but you've got them to start with. You've got them there. And I think a proposal for what you need to then put together a constructicon, if you're going to say, let's have a structured account of the constructions in a language, I'm proposing that you actually need to do that in lots of different ways, because you need a network that goes from form to meaning, and you need a network that goes from meaning to form, and then you actually need another network, which is the systemic network that goes from meaning to form in a slightly different way. So a bit of a challenge there, perhaps, for construction grammarians. To systemic functional grammarians, I think it suggests where constructions might sit in the lexis grammar continuum. Systemicists right since Halliday have said we have a continuum from the most general statements of grammar at one end to the most specific statements of lexis at the other end. And somewhere in the middle sit patterns or constructions. And I think what I've demonstrated is perhaps where in the middle those constructions might sit, and possibly provide a model for how future work of the kind might be done. And thank you very much for listening. And I've left you with the web address of the website that I was talking about.